So, Scott, your background stands out a bit unique among some of our other guests. You have a degree in economics, and for the first 20 or so years of your career, you're in finance-related businesses where you had a highly successful business.
That is a skill that's super useful in life sciences too, in drug development and other areas of life sciences, certainly.
So maybe you can tell us a little more of what you mean by, hey, we're a technology company that has this function.
I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll really get focused around their solution, around their invention, right? They get excited about that, and they focus all their attention on that, and they forget what problem they're solving. Go by what people do, not by what they say. So for example, do they send you a thank you email, right? Do they come prepared? Do they have questions? Do they ask questions?
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory Austin and Dr. Chad Briscoe. Hello and welcome to BioTalk Unzipped, where our mission is to unzip, unlock, and uncover the stories behind medical progress. I'm your host, Gregory Austin from Kansas City. I'm a life science professional in the quality and regulatory consulting space, or ECI. Along with me from North Carolina is my friend and co-host, Dr. Chad Briscoe. Chad is a bioanalytical scientific leader with Solarion, and we publish BioTalk Unzipped twice a month. We bring experts from different corners of the pharmaceutical, biotech, and med device worlds to share their innovations, insights, career journeys, and personal stories to the show. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to our episodes, and thank you for listening. Today, we're joined by Scott Ogle, CEO of and co-founder of TruLab, a digital platform that simplifies the logistics of managing biological samples for clinical trials. Before founding TruLab, Scott spent nearly 20 years at SageWorks, helping it grow from a startup to serving half of the financial institutions in the U.S. His personal inspiration for TruLab came from witnessing his father's 6-year battle with multiple myeloma. Scott holds a degree in economics from UNC Chapel Hill and is an Eagle Scout. Hey, Scott, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're very happy to have you here on the show. It's our tradition here at BioTalk Unzipped to offer a $100 donation to the charity of our guest's choice. And Scott, you posted this week on LinkedIn that TruLab would match donations made yesterday to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And that's sadly what took your dad. So LLS is your charity of choice, which I certainly understand your passion behind that and why you're kind of connected with LLS. But can you tell me a little bit more about your partnership with LLS?
Yeah, sure. We really started partnering with them last year, but in doing research into which charity out there is doing great work around particularly finding a cure for cancer, they were the one that stuck out to me. As you mentioned, Dad passing away when I was young was not only a driver for our partnership with LLS, but also a driver for starting TruLab in the first place. So, really excited about what they're doing in the industry to kind of advance things forward. So that was really why we chose to partner with LLS, and thanks for making that donation as a result of this podcast today.
Excellent. Absolutely. And I did notice on their website that they have helped advance 70% or so of the treatment options that are now approved by the FDA for the condition. So that's really cool. And if any of the listeners are interested in learning more about LLS, please take a look at the show notes below, and there'll be a link on how you can learn more about that great organization and what they're doing. So, Scott, your background stands out a bit unique among some of our other guests. You have a degree in economics, and for the first 20 or so years of your career, you're in finance-related businesses where you had a highly successful business. You entered into the pharma space with your founding at TruLab. Tell us about how that all came together.
Sure. Yeah. No. And it goes back to when my dad contracted multiple myeloma when I was 12. He had 6.5 years of not good quality of life. I'm then a freshman at UNC Chapel Hill when he passed, and by that point, I was burned out on anything life sciences, medicine, anything healthcare. get me the heck away from that, right? So it really drove me. So what's the furthest thing from science? Is it finance? I'm not sure if that's actually the opposite end of the spectrum, but that's where I spent my career, was in finance, and actually went into technology early in my career. This was in the mid late 90s when the internet was just coming of age, right? And so large financial institution I worked for right out of school. Because I was 22, therefore I must be smart about technology, right? It was kind of the sense of how things went. So I got exposed into the technology area of a large Merrill Lynch and got a lot of great experiences and was stretched at a young age around that. And then that just got me super interested in the passion that took place in the technology world, especially at that time, all .coms and stuff. Went out to San Francisco, joined the .com, and then ultimately moved back here and joined SageWorks, which you referenced earlier. It was an early stage technology company. And it was the cross between banking and finance and technology, a software company. And was there for almost 20 years. And then when we exited that business, our business was acquired by private equity. That's when I had some time to reflect. And I had some time to reflect on, and I hope everyone has time to reflect like I did, which is back 5 years ago, where you actually start to think about why am I here on the planet? What am I doing? What am I bringing to the world positively? And that's when I really realized that, now's probably the time. Dad passed away a long time ago. Now's the time to maybe go back and, cancer is a really good adversary. Maybe now's the time to start looking at maybe doing something in life sciences. But, I'm 45. I'm not, at that point, I'm 45. I'm not science trained. I'm not a PhD. I haven't been in the industry. How could I possibly make an impact? And when I was networking around, trying to figure out what I was going to do at that point in my career, and meanwhile, bear in mind, I'm 45, been with a software company for a long time, been a software guy. I was reflecting on what did I actually do at that software company? Well, what we learned to do was we learned change management and moving people off paper onto technology and all the efficiencies that come from that. That's what that company did in a nutshell. We moved bankers, when they make loans to businesses, off paper and using paper to do the analysis they do to make a loan, onto a technology platform. Well, guess what? That is a skill that's super useful in life sciences too, in drug development and other areas of life sciences, certainly. And what's fascinating is I lacked the confidence when we first started TruLab. I lacked the confidence on, I'm not sure if I know all the acronyms. I'm not sure if I know all the deep science behind what's going on in this industry. And I still don't have all that knowledge today, but I found that actually works in my favor, right? I can come in and I can ask the dumb guy questions, and I can also not be blinded by what the way things have always been done, right? And the fact that people are today still using Sharpies on the sides of tubes when samples are collected during clinical trials, the fact that that's still going on today, I think everybody in the world will probably nod their head and it's like, yeah, that's stupid, right? But it's still happening. And I think it was very helpful for me to have the outside perspective. Now, my co-founder is a career drug development executive, many years at Genentech. I was head of R&D for a Biotech for almost 10 years. So lots of deep knowledge around the problem, around this industry. Has taught me, he's been my professor, teaching me everything about the industry. But I think it took kind of that outside perspective to come in and be able to build a company that has really, I feel like I'm really happy about the success we're having in changing this industry for the better.
Yeah,
long answer to the question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's good.
That was, you kind of answered part of our next question. Something that I've heard you say when we've talked is that TruLab is really a technology company that that does this other piece, right? Solves some issues in the clinical trial space. So maybe you can tell us a little more what you mean by, hey, we're a technology company that has this function.
Yeah. So we first sought out. So look, when starting a business, the most important thing to do is understand the problem that you're solving. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs they'll really get focused around their solution, around their invention, right? And they get excited about that, and they focus all their attention on that, and they forget what problem they're solving. Or in some cases, they build a solution and they go look for a problem that it solves, right? So one of the things we did with TruLab is we focused really hard and researched really, really deeply a specific problem. And it was all around, as you mentioned, biological samples, many collected in clinical trials, right? All of the data that we get around clinical trials, not all of it, but a lot of that data comes from biological samples. Well, what we found, and the problem was, the management of that, when it's all done in paper, is really hard. So one problem is, where are my samples? So if I'm a drug company, I'm running a trial, in many cases, I don't even know where they are, right? I don't know, have they even been collected, any of that. So we started with solving that problem. And the root that we found, the root cause of the problem was really all around paper being used in the management of collection and the management of the logistics of that. Now, there's been attempts, certainly, to solve this, but a lot of them are portal-based. They're just requiring data entry. Yeah. What they're essentially trying to do is take what's already done in paper and then have that keyed into a system. Well, that's different than just eliminating paper, right? And so our view is
layers on top, right? That's what I've seen. It's like, oh, now we have an extra step, right? It just adds to the process.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it ultimately has tended to look something like this, where some player in the industry might be delegating the data entry to a clinical site. And so you hear about site burn. It's true. They have all these systems, and they're just required to take all the stuff, do it the whole way they normally do, which is paper and Sharpies on tubes and sticky notes, and then they have to key that data in. So it's just more work for them, and that doesn't solve the problem.
No. So you would have like a phlebotomist, for example, at a clinical site, going to a patient, drawing blood. They have their mobile device, and after they draw the blood, they're entering in some type of data that they collected this information from this patient, or is it scanned? Or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so we use the native camera of the phone, the iPhone, right? And the pandemic taught the world how to scan a barcode with their phone, right? But yeah, it's scanning the barcodes on the tubes, and all of the other data is already in the protocol and lab manual. So and that's already been set, like the schedule of assessments, and all of that's set. So there's some tap selections that are made, but there's no data entry. And it is using the scanner on the phone, right? So it's scanning at collection, so that way you capture the time of the collection. You scan when you aliquot, you scan when you put it in the freezer to capture the time going in the freezer. You scan it when it ships. You scan the waybill of whoever you're shipping with so that you can track in transit. So it really is a lot of tap and scan. It is no data entry, very intentionally and deliberately not data entry, right? So yeah, generally it's around sample management and using this. But here's what we learned. This is the pivot. So if you're starting a company, you got to be ready to pivot, right? You got to be able to do what the market tells you to do.
Yeah.
We answered the question of where are my samples, but what we found was the drug companies really like to be able to know what was happening in real time right now at sites on their protocol. So all around protocol compliance. And then sites, on the other hand, they really like having right on their phone, they like to be able to have a protocol lab manual blended together with the instructions right there, mobile, and tells them what to do. So both the user, which are the clinical sites, they're getting a value because they've got a cheat sheet now that's digitized for them. And then the sponsor, the drug company, then has visibility in what's going on right now. And that's valuable because then they can actually course correct if they start seeing things that are not going, deviations, right? If they start seeing things that go wrong, they can then course correct before it becomes systemic across all of their patients, all of their sites on their study. So that's the pivot we've made, is to be really not just about where are my samples, but really how's the protocol being executed.
So yeah, it's almost a protocol compliance company in a sense, or at least part of a very important part of the protocol. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the areas we certainly on the lab side see as a major challenge bringing samples in. I mean, that's we've as you know, we've seen your product in a couple of studies we've run, several of the studies we've run, and we're always grateful when we see it come in, because it's so they just run more smoothly. That's the, I guess, the short answer. And we don't spend our time reconciling at the back end with the clinical site. So it's really fantastic. How did you guys come up with the name TruLab?
Yeah.
What's the meaning behind that?
Yeah, great question. And we talked about, like, is that the right name for us? Because we're not just a sample management company. It's really, like you said, protocol compliance. Lab certainly implies samples. How does anyone come up with their company? Well, here's a couple of things that went into the calculation on that. We liked 2 syllables. We liked that the domain was available. I mean, come on, that's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
Big part.
It rolls off the tongue where it's pretty easy to remember, although I can't tell you how many times we're called TruLabs with an
Right.
S. Yeah, everybody in my company knows it's my pet peeve. But yes, we came up with the company because we knew the company name because we knew it was going to be at that time really sample oriented, so lab made sense, and True was kind of like quality and accuracy.
Yeah, I like it. It rings true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why do clinical trials companies need a company like TruLab?
Well, for one, basically the sponsors of clinical trials are spending a lot of time reconciling data, trying to figure out where they are on their trial. They don't even know, because there's really a big black box as to the operation, particularly in that first mile of a journey of a biological sample, which is at clinical sites, right? It's a big black box. So if you're spending a lot of money to run a trial and you have no idea what's going on in the first mile of that therein lies a big problem. So that's one answer to the question, Gregory. But I mean, I think also it's wasted time, wasted money, because a lot of times, this is a fascinating thing that we learned when we were in our problem search early on. 20 to 25% of biological samples wind up getting tossed out, not used in research for a myriad of reasons. They weren't collected in window, they didn't make it into the freezer in time, they got lost in transit, they sat on a loading dock. Here's a big one. Somebody hand wrote on the side and they couldn't really figure out what it said, had to throw out, swabbed tubes, then you got to throw out both. I mean, it's nuts, 20 to 25%. So think about the patient burden associated with that, right? It's amazing. So that's not an economic reason why a drug company needs to do that, but that's the ethical reason why it should be. This is a problem that needs to be fixed.
But there's real cost in that too.
Yep.
But yeah, the ethics is at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's time for our first section of New News.
New news.
New News. Published just 2 days ago on September 11th in Nature Cancer Journal, entitled ISB 2001 Trispecific T-Cell Engager Shows Strong Tumor Cytotoxicity and Overcomes Immune Escape Mechanisms of Multiple Myeloma Cells, by many authors. What happens in this article basically discusses the ISB 2001, a trispecific T-cell engager. It's targeting multiple myeloma, and it combines 2 specific antigens to enhance the immune system's ability to kill tumor cells. It shows promising results in both preclinical models and patient-derived cells, overcoming some of the limitations of existing treatments by preventing immune escape mechanisms. The dual targeting approach also ensures more effective tumor cell destruction, and even in cases of like antigen loss or mutation, which is common in relapsed refractory multiple myeloma, the innovation dose calculation method used in these clinical trials also aims to optimize the efficacy and safety, reducing risk for patients in early stages of these trials. The article highlights the importance of really developing treatments that overcome, like I said, those immune escape mechanisms in multiple myeloma. What, Scott, gives you hope about the future of MM treatment in light of these innovations?
Great. Well, I would say, that's fantastic news to hear, right? Starting this company, you see somebody back in the late 80s, 90s, there were no treatments anywhere close to even what we have today. So it just gives me such hope. I also hope that we can use the same level of innovation and and exploratory vision that we have on the research side of things to even uncover things, potential wins like this. I hope we can also take that innovation into the development side. I see it in research, but not necessarily in the development side. So I hope that we stay on that and we stay diligent to see it through to actually a therapy where patients can get benefit from it. But I love it. I love that there's discovery work. I have certain hope, and maybe it won't even be in my lifetime or our lifetimes, but I have hope and belief that we will find treatments that are going to work. And I think it's exciting to hear. That's my first reaction.
Yeah. Another thing just specific to this article as well, actually it's a really easy to read article. It's definitely a heavy scientific article, but for certainly for the scientists that listen to the podcast, but also I'd say the science enthusiasts who want to work their way through and kind of read it, it's not too heavy. It's really interesting. But one of the other things that comes out in this article, just thinking about clinical trials being more effective, more targeted, is they use this what's called quantitative systems pharmacology approach, and they looked at multiple different factors and brought them together so that they could actually have a more relevant clinical starting dose, which of course allows them to have a more efficient early stage trial, which accelerates drug development, which gets these things, lower cost, faster to patients. Everything about it. So there's a really interesting bit in this article as well. It's packed full of actually really interesting bits for people who are in this space, or like say are science enthusiasts who might want to dig in. But this new QSP approach is really, really cool as well. So I'd highly encourage people to check out the article if they're interested in this space also.
Nice. And we'll have links to these articles in the show notes as well for you to take a look at. So Scott, I'm curious, growing up with a father who was a math teacher and your mom was an artist, how did that unique combination of influences sort of shape your perspective on business and problem solving?
It's a good question. Mom and dad were polar opposites, right? A math teacher and an artist. My dad was type A plus personality. My mom was so type B, she's type C. So these are really polar opposites. How did it shape my view of business? Well, Dad was always, we were always playing. I was never pushed to play sports, but we were always playing math games, right? And so I think that trained me early to train me about pattern recognition. And I think what's fascinating is I use that today every day. And so give you an example of what you might not connect, but we do a lot of interviewing and hiring, right? We're a growth company. Right. We do a lot of hiring of people. At SageWorks, we grew to several hundred employees, and same thing. There's a lot of patterns there, right? There's a lot of pattern recognition when you're interviewing people. And so I think the pattern recognition that I learned from Dad through those math games he made us always do, which I hated, I think that really has been a part of what I use today. The artist side, I think, my mom still today, she's 90. She's a really talented artist, and I didn't get any of that gene. She's a painter. But I think creativity can come out in lots of different ways, right?
Sure.
And I think
of course.
I think in software, how you design the user experience of software is all, there's a lot of creativity in that. And so I think it blends in different ways. Fascinating to see how those kind of non-business people have had an impact in this business, right?
Right.
Indeed. You mentioned the patterns that you are looking for in the hiring process.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can share some of those patterns that you use to detect someone who could be a high achiever or a good fit for your company and your culture, or someone that you know is absolutely not going to fit.
Yeah, great question, and we probably don't have enough time for me to like soapbox throughout the whole thing on that, but I'll tell you a couple thoughts. First of all, there's one thing that you can't coach, and that's energy. And just like a basketball coach when recruiting for his or her team, you can't coach height, right? In this business, you can't coach energy, right? So I don't necessarily look for a certain degree. In software, we don't have, I'm not necessarily looking for computer science. I'm not necessarily looking for a certain major or, degree. I'm looking for energy. That's really important. I'm also looking for a fit with our culture. And that starts with actually having a culture and defining it. And back in my previous company, I thought it was kind of cheesy when I'd see Ford Motor Company, not to pick on Ford Motor Company, but when I would see them post their values or principles on their website, I thought that was more like an investor thing, marketing. It's kind of, no one really followed it. It was just nothing, right? Cheesy, whatever. But I realize now growing that company, I learned how important that is, not only to have it and message it externally, but beat it like a drum, right? Beat it like a drum, and just consistently be managing that. Because if you're a growing company like TruLab is and like SageWorks was, you're bringing on new people, and that could easily just change your culture, right? And that might be okay to change with new people who bring in new ideas. I'm not saying it shouldn't be changing and evolving, but you can't lose what's gotten you there and the good things, right? So it really takes being intentional about the culture. So we have written on our wall our 6 value points. Of course, the acronym TruLab is what they're modeled off of.
That helps.
Yep, that helps. But it's in being intentional about culture and then interviewing for that, right? So when you're interviewing for that. That's like your North Star that you're interviewing for. And it's not just you interviewing. The other thing I'd say is a big key component or lesson learned is that it's a lot of people. It's hard to get a job at TruLab. You got to interview with like 10 to 12 people, right? And that's pretty unusual, right? Because most times you think about like the interview process is you interview with someone in HR, then you interview with the hiring manager, maybe a VP or a peer, but that's usually it, right? Yeah. So we're kind of like this, you're meeting on a cross section of the company, and that also helps with making the right hires. Back to the pattern thing though, is I'm looking for energy, I'm looking for fit to our culture, and here's another thing for anybody who's doing hiring and struggling with how hard that is, because it is really hard.
Yep.
Go by what people do, not by what they say. So for example, do they send you a thank you email, right? Do they come prepared? Do they have questions? Do they ask questions? Do they have a copy of their resume printed? The things they do are more important than what they say. That's what I've kind of seen over time.
And you mentioned, maybe 10 to 12 interviews. Are those one-on-ones, or do you do like panel interviews or mix it up?
We'll mix it up. It's not necessarily 10 one-on-one interviews. It's probably 6 one-on-one interviews, and then maybe some group stuff also.
Okay. That's interesting. And what you said, I think, is really important about values. It's one thing to post them, right, in your organization, but the danger inherent is if you're not living them, if you're not demonstrating that, especially from leadership perspective, then that can come back to bite you, because they'll say, oh, well, you're just full of it because you're putting up these values, but you're acting like this.
Right. I like to call myself out too when I don't follow them, because I don't all the time, right?
And human.
That's a good way to teach the necessity of it, and also to say, hey, we're all in this together, right?
Scott, I'll really put you on the spot.
Okay.
CEO in a hoodie. What are you going to do if an interviewee shows up in a hoodie?
Yeah, okay, good question. I'm not necessarily going to hold that against them. because we are a software company. It's more of an informal. I mean, good Lord. I mean, think back to when I interviewed back in the day. We were all wearing suits, right? I mean, so it's changed a lot. And in software, we're not going to hold that against people. I would call that probably a 5-yard penalty to use
Fair, I like that.
it's a 5-yard penalty. It's not going to be a game breaker, but it's a 5-yard penalty. I think you want to show some respect, right? I think there is a little bit of that. But
I worked in a tech company years ago, and we had a software developer come in, had a hole in his shirt, asked for a piece of gum from the receptionist, and chomped all the way through the interview. And a few other attitudinal things that were not impressive. So obviously he didn't make the cut. But,
That might be, that might be like a targeting penalty. You're thrown out.
That's right. So you can make up for that. In my opinion, you can make up for that by asking a lot of good questions, lots of follow-up, lots of demonstrating that you want to be on the bus. I mean, for me, as a CEO, I want to know that people want to be on the bus. They may be awesome, right, qualification-wise, but if they don't want to be on the bus, that's more than a 5-yard penalty, right?
Right. I like that.
Absolutely.
You know, the other thing that I noticed is you guys moved your office recently, and you moved right in the heart of RTP, which is really cool. Seems like you're leaning into the work from the office, or bringing people into the office, having a team together. Talk about your philosophy on that.
Great. Yeah, great. So I'm pretty old school on that. I like being in the office, and I will tell you that some companies can do kind of a whole distributed remote work much easier than others. If you're in a very dynamic, fast pace, things are changing all the time, including strategy, that's really hard to do where everyone's remote. There's so much that happens for our company in the hallways, right? People used to call it water cooler talk or whatever, but I call it hallway talk, right? And we're passing between meetings. That's where stuff gets done, right? And particularly since we hire a lot of people right out of school, they're getting trained on what work is, right? I mean, generally, they're getting trained just the first jobs for a lot of them. Really important for them to be here and learning on the fly. And I will say that I think it's given us a leg up in hiring, because we have a lot of people coming out of school who actually want that. They really would much prefer that than being confined to their home, working in their home office. So the summary there is that yes, we are, the vast majority of us here, Chad, in RTP at least, is here in the office. We do have distributed people in California and other places. We have a head of Europe. But for the most part, we are here, and we do everything we can to keep the ones who aren't up to speed. So I'll have a one-on-one weekly meeting with a lot of the folks who aren't actually physically here, just to try to keep them all, along with us. Right?